So, there's a new book out called Heart and Soul Connection, and this is by the Grihastha Vision team. Just came out a few days ago. And if you find the book when it's available in your area, get it. Otherwise, you could probably order it. If you go to the Grihastha Vision team website, you could probably order it there. So, in this book, it has a chapter that I was reading about how to choose somebody. And we also discussed it in the Grihastha workshop. So, it's really important because when people meet somebody, then we've talked about this, there's a lot of chemistry that goes on, and sometimes the chemistry overwhelms the intelligence. And sometimes the chemistry makes people think they're compatible and they're meant to be with one another because they feel good when they're with one another. And one thing that's important to understand is that you have a service to your spouse, and the service that you do to your spouse is to help him or her feel good, be happy. So it's not, if you get caught up in the idea of that your spouse is supposed to make you happy and your spouse is supposed to make you feel good, you're going to run into a lot of problems, especially because that's why you're initially attracted, because they make you feel good. Well, they won't necessarily always make you feel good, and if that's what you're basing the relationship on, then you could be very discouraged in the future. So it has to go more than just beyond that. I feel good when I'm with this person, or I like the way this person looks, I like their personality. That's all okay, but it can't be based on that. So one of the things that they recommend in the Grihastha book, and I've also read this elsewhere, is it's best for a person to try as far as possible consider the kind of person they would like to be married to. What that person would be like, what they would be interested in, what their goals and objectives would be like, and so forth. And the reason that this is recommended is because if you're very clear about this, then when you meet someone who you're very attracted to but doesn't fit that description, then you realize this is not the right person, even though you feel good with that person or you're physically attracted to that person, which is one of the big problems that we face in choosing somebody, which is why traditionally parents were involved in making decisions, because they could help check out, understand potential bride or bridegroom based on the qualities and characteristics of their child. So when you're doing it on your own, then it's very easy that you just get bewildered, basically, because when the male and the female come together, then all kinds of things crazy things, and fire can happen, and fireworks can go off, and basically your intelligence may become overcome just by the physical attraction or the good feelings you have when you're together. And marriage is so much more, mosquito alert, marriage is so much more than that. So, I wanted to read something, if you don't mind. There's a couple of things that this is really good things, and I think we've studied this when we discussed this when we were talking a few weeks ago, and Antony was analyzing whether or not he should get married based on understanding his nature, and this is one of the things I recommend. So I'll read. So when you're thinking of getting married, then they suggest there's some questions you should ask yourself, and we'll go through the questions and we'll explain them, and it's very, very helpful. If you're already married, then don't think, oh no, I made a mistake. but rather think, I can help others who are getting married with this knowledge. And I've given you so much information, so many insights and attitudes and tools by which you can have a better marriage. And so when you're married, you always think, how can we make it work better? Okay, so the first question is, are you ready to be married? And most people will say yes, but they may not be ready. I was just, I don't know if I told you, but if you go to KrishnaTube, there's a video, I think it's from 2003, a bunch of young second-generation men on traveling Rath Yatra, which is a tour that travels with the Rath Yatra. And they're probably in their early 20s. And it takes through the month or 2 months of them traveling, and you can see something about young boys. And what you see in that video is young boys tend to be very rowdy. These boys are very rowdy. And you have to watch the video to know what I mean. But I don't want to say immature because I don't know them. It just appears that way in the video, that they're not. You could look at the video and you look at all these boys and think, nah, they're not ready for marriage. Boys, they're men. You say, no, they're not ready to be married. They're not settled. They're not. You can see they're not really settled. They're not. So just because you want to get married or just because you're attracted to the opposite sex doesn't mean you should or you're ready. So let's read what they say. What determines our readiness for marriage? Is it merely the desire for relationships with the opposite sex? Is it our biological clock? You've hit a certain age and the alarm has gone off. Is it convenience? Well, it would be, I need somebody to help me, and she lives down the street, and we like one another, so we could live more cheaply, and she could do my laundry. And is it our dharma? No, it's my duty, I should do it, it's the right thing. Question is it the right thing yet for you? In our devotee community, we have seen what happens when a person suppresses his or her desire to be married. Such a person may manifest symptoms such as moroseness, unexplained illness, anxiety, withdrawal from one's usual association, increased fault-finding, excessive preaching that demeans the opposite sex, or perhaps leaving the movement altogether. So there's two sides of it. One side is you deny that you're ready, and one side is that you say you're ready, but you're not actually mature enough yet. So yeah, if somebody is speaking negatively about the opposite sex, everybody knows they need to be married. That's how you know. Anyway. How supportive is your environment? Shane has said marriage to become more Krishna conscious. Yeah, that's why you want to do it. We can't emphasize this point enough, because when a man and woman come together, the desire to enjoy one another becomes strong. But the whole point of coming together is to become Krishna conscious, to help one another become Krishna conscious. That's it. That's the dharmic reason. And beyond the dharmic reason, it's just men and women come together to enjoy. And if you think that you're going to enjoy by uniting with a woman or uniting with a man, if that's your main motive, it can cause a lot of problems. Because your main motive should be to come together to advance in Krishna consciousness, to help serve one another. If you have that, then you have a good platform. If you have as your platform to enjoy, then we understand that we can't perfectly enjoy, and then you rely on this other person to make you happy, and then that becomes a big mess, because people can make you happy, but if you're a miserable person by nature, nobody will make you happy. And happiness is not just that we rely on someone else. If we rely too much on someone else, if you enter marriage thinking, well, this person will make me happy, you'll be let down. Especially if you're an unhappy person and you think they'll make you happy. No, it doesn't work exactly like that. To some degree it does, but not. It's not that you don't. That person. It's just not a magical thing. Okay, how supportive is your environment? Hopefully you are in a supportive environment that acknowledges your needs, assisting you in the transition from single life to married life, rather than in one that minimizes or even ridicules your decision to get married. In other words, she's saying, sometimes you can be in an environment where everyone's saying don't get married because it's a fall down. And that's, as we discussed in the last few weeks, it's an unhealthy paradigm, and if you have that paradigm, you enter marriage, it's not going to work well. It's going to be difficult for you. If those around you view marriage as a sort of compromise for persons who couldn't make it, or as a fall down into the deep dark well of family life, you may enter into Grihastha ashram with a sense of shame. You may even harbor resentment towards your marriage partner for being an accomplice to the crime of marriage. This does happen, that a man becomes attracted to a woman, and they get married, and then it doesn't go well, and then he ends up blaming her for being attractive to him, which is immature, of course. If this is the case, you should either forsake that negative association or forsake the idea of marriage. In other words, she's saying, as we've discussed, if you have negative paradigms when you enter marriage, don't, because you're just going to cause yourself suffering, and you are going to cause other people suffering, namely your wife or your husband. Anyway, she's speaking from reality. You may think, no, it's not like that, people don't think like that. No, she's saying this because they do think like this. So she's saying either you have to remove yourself from this negative association, or don't buy into it, or if you have these negative paradigms, then you should wait to get married. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a lot of Lochini's saying, you know, she got married to have financial support. Okay, so that's one of the reasons, but not the only reason. There are many reasons not to get married. At least we have to, like I said, you have to know who would be compatible and what you're looking for in marriage, so that when the wrong person comes, even though you like him, even though you feel good with him, then you know it's not the right person. And sometimes you have to trust your instinct. Sometimes you just know the person has some things that you need that would be helpful, but he's not the right person, and you can feel that. And so you shouldn't say, well, he has 3 good things and 26 bad things, but the good things I need, and so I'll overlook the bad things. No, you won't overlook them. You'll overlook them for a while, but eventually they'll be staring you in the face. Now, Lochini, are you rich? No, she's not rich. See? I don't know, maybe she is rich now. I mean, if you're going to marry a man for money, then at least marry a millionaire. Actually, I was reading that some women, I mean, for devotees, you know, the financial thing's important, but it's not the most important. For non-devotees, sometimes that's one of the top 3 things on their list. Okay, another question. Not question, but another consideration. Positive examples from Scripture. Srimad Bhagavatam relates how Kardama Muni prayed to the Lord for a suitable partner. Was Ashley here? Oh no. Ashley was asking. Ashley was asking why somebody gets, if someone's Krishna conscious, why they get married. Call up Ashley, tell her to come. Somebody Skype her. This is for her. This is really good. This is from the Bhagavatam. The Lord was recounting the Bhagavatam, the story of Kardama Muni. Kardama Muni, he was doing austerity, then at a certain point he prayed to Krishna for a suitable wife. The Lord was personally present, so we may wonder why Kardama Muni did not ask instead to be taken immediately to the spiritual realm. In other words, Krishna was present and he said, I would like a suitable wife. Srila Prabhupada comments that Kardama Muni could ascertain that he was not yet competent for liberation, but that he could advance to that platform with the help of a good wife. As the saying goes, God helps those who help themselves. Krishna was very pleased to make suitable arrangements for him. Interesting story. So he understood his position and he asked Krishna to find a suitable wife because this would help him in his Krishna consciousness. So that's another consideration. As I've said a few other times, there's some men who realize that they actually are not. They're not the kind of people that anybody could live with, and so, in that case, they shouldn't ask. They shouldn't want to get married because they'll just disturb the woman, or vice versa. A woman could stir this. Oh, she's listening. Okay, so Ashley, this is for you. I'm going to read that again. The Lord was personally present, so we may wonder why Kardama Muni did not ask instead to be taken to the spiritual realm. Srila Prabhupada comments that Kardama could ascertain that he was not yet competent for liberation, but that he could advance to the platform with the help of a good wife. Advance to that platform. As the saying goes, God helps those God helps those who help themselves. Okay. Yeah. So Shane has a good husband. So it's a good point, because let's say you're like I was saying, okay, you're very attracted to the person for various reasons. It could be financial reasons. Not that being attracted to a person is not important, and not that finances are not important. But what we're saying, if you allow those things to overwhelm your consciousness or your intelligence, you may end up with the wrong person. And then you're going to spend your whole life having to deal with more difficult situations. Sometimes impossible. Sometimes the situations can be extremely difficult to resolve because the other person does not want to resolve them, or the other person is not into changing. So we've been, through the classes, we've been giving you hints about things to look for. And I think this will come up. But anyway, I'll mention it now. A person has to be willing to work on themselves, because whoever you marry is not going to be perfect. In case you didn't know that. So he may or she may seem perfect when you first meet them. But they're actually not perfect. And there are going to be many things that don't sync well with you. And so if a person's willing to be self-reflective, if they're willing to listen to their spouse, if they're willing to change, to improve themselves, if they're open to that, then that's the best person to marry, because you can always improve situations. You can always, if there's a problem, you can always work on it, because the person's willing to work on it, willing to look at it. But if a person doesn't want to, that can be a huge problem, especially if you're not getting along well and they don't want to change. And this is very common. One partner wants to change, the other one doesn't, and the other one is doing things which is causing a lot of distress for the other partner. And the other partner then becomes a bit miserable, or very miserable. Okay, so he became, what we read, Kardama became married to advance in Krishna consciousness because he didn't think he was ready yet. He was not ready to be liberated. He needed to still work more on his Krishna consciousness, and he felt if he had a wife, that would help him. Well, anyone actually saying, I would not want to marry a rogue just because he wants to marry me and change. I have no patience to change anyone. When you get married, both you and your spouse are going to have to adjust to one another, which sometimes requires change. I think what you're talking about is like major change, from being total debauchee to being someone good character. Not really talking about that, although that could eventually become a situation. I'm talking more about a person has a certain nature or a certain attitude, and it's not working well for you. And so you have to be able to discuss it, and the person has to be willing to look at it and has to be able to work on themselves so that they don't cause you distress, or vice versa. So if you have to be able to communicate that to your spouse, or your spouse has to be able to communicate it to you, so you listen and you work on it, or he works on it, or you both work on it. That's just how relationships work. And if you both walk into the relationship saying, this is how I am and I can't change, then you should find a divorce lawyer the day after you get married, because you're going to need one, because it won't work. That's another way of saying don't get married. Just become a nun. Because you have to understand, when you're living that closely with another person, you have to make adjustments. That's just the way it works. They may not be big adjustments, it just may be, just like it may be something simple, like you're always late, and they're always on time, and they have a schedule, and they say, I need you to be on time. And you say, but I'm always late, I've never been on time in my life. They say, well, now you're going to have to be on time, because you're dealing with another person. And if you say, well, I can't do those things, better not get married, because that's what it means. Or find somebody you don't like and marry them, because that way you could cause them to suffer and get back at them. A nun. Nuns have a good life. Some of them. If you like being a nun, you have a good life. Yeah, it's true. If you like being a nun. Okay. See, marriage these are things to consider before you're getting married. Seeing marriage as a positive step favorable for your spiritual growth. Let us assume that you are open to the possibility of a real Krishna conscious marriage and view it as a joyful rite of passage, a mature commitment in a responsible life. Favorable for your spiritual growth. If you can tell yourself with 100% conviction that the Grihastha ashram is an honorable institution with as much spiritual integrity as the other three ashrams, you are well on your way to the next step, seeking a suitable candidate as your future spouse. In other words, what she's saying is, as we've discussed over 2 or 3 classes, there's a lot of negative paradigms floating around the Hare Krishna movement about women, about marriage, about the Grihastha ashram not being, being, I don't want to say deep dark well, but just being a deviation. You have the brahmachari who's a full-time preacher, now he gets married and he's back in college, he has no time for service, so there's this connotation that he's just working, he's not really doing much anymore for the mission. So she's saying that you have to analyze your position and then see that, okay, this is something which is good for you, something you need, and you go in with a very positive attitude. You see it as a bona fide ashram, a place where you can make spiritual advancement, and then you do it like that. Then you're in a good position. But she's saying, this is Uttama who wrote this, she's saying if you have any negative connotations about marriage, you have to free yourself from those, because they're going to play havoc in your marriage. And we've talked about this, so I think it's clear. Now, I'll just give you an example. What is a common example? I don't know how common, but it does happen. a man will get married and he wants to live in married life like a brahmachari, which maybe to the women sounds weird. But as we know, men can be weird, especially brahmacharis. In other words, he kind of wants to have the best of both worlds. So he realizes he can't remain celibate, he can't remain single, so he wants a wife, but he wants to live more or less like a brahmachari. Maybe live separately in the temple, maybe live in a van, maybe live in a studio apartment, travel and preach. Now, there are some women who are okay with this. I just haven't met them yet, but I know they exist. No, there are a few, but usually the women who would like to live that way don't need to get married. So if a man thinks that he's going to find a woman like that, there are a few, but they're rare. And so a lot of men get married and they maintain this brahmachari consciousness. So they're living like brahmacharis and they're not really fulfilling the needs of their wife or being normal husbands. So ladies, beware of brahmacharis marrying you, because some of them never actually become grihastas, they stay as brahmacharis. It's true. Okay. Shane says, I know a brahmachari got married and still practiced the same. His wife ran away after 28 years together. Her complaint was he's too robotic. Yeah, I mean, if a man's really at heart a brahmachari, it's kind of an injustice to marry, because women don't want to marry brahmacharis. Women don't want to marry gurus or brahmacharis. They want to marry husbands who are normal. Yeah. Chin, not only is it scary, it's normal. And so you want to look for a man who's normal, who's balanced, who's got a heart, who can who can allow himself to feel affection for his wife. You know, these brahmachari husbands, they'll feel like, well, if I feel affection for my wife, that's Maya. Or if I spend too much time with my son or daughter or wife, that's Maya. So usually it doesn't work. Okay. So now she asked the question, are you really ready? So she's saying, okay, if you've got over all the negative connotations, then are you really ready? Okay, let's find out if you're really ready. Most of the qualities that you should look for in a partner are also qualities that you should possess. Very good point. Very good point, because when you're looking for someone, say, I want somebody like this, and this, and also this, that, this, 108 qualities for your partner. But really, as important as that is, you should be thinking, I should also have those qualities. So when she's saying whatever you're looking for in your partner, you shouldn't think, okay, he just has to have that or she just has to have that, but I don't want it. Now, Alexi not only wants to eat pizza, but she can cook good pizza also. That's a plug for you, Alexi, it's a plug of one of your good qualities. So if you like eating pizza, make sure your spouse likes eating pizza. Very important. As you read on, be introspective and see if there are skills you could learn, attitudes you could change, or values you could aspire to live by. So, in other words, what she's saying, which is so important, don't just be focused on what you want in another person, but also understand what you're looking for in another person is what you also need to become. So, I think some people enter marriage just thinking, well, you don't have to do anything. It just, it just happens. The guy or the wife does everything, and mystically everything becomes good. No, it's you get married and the work begins. After the honeymoon's over, the work begins. But it's good work because you have to improve yourself. So, if you don't want to improve yourself, just get a dog. And, be happy with the dog. Because dogs will like you no matter what you're like. Or live with your mother. She'll like you no matter what. But husband or wife, no, they won't. They're not going to like you if you don't act properly. They're not bound to like you. You kind of have to earn it. You know what I mean? Okay. Yeah, this is a really good one. I hope you're all listening. Okay, listen to this, everyone. Marriage is not a cure for your personal unhappiness. Very important. Before moving to the next topic, I want to emphasize that you should examine your own motivation for wanting to get married. It is best not to have the expectation that the other person is responsible for your happiness. If you are not happy, if you're not a happy person, work on dealing with your personal issues before looking for a partner. If you have unhealthy emotional needs, you may develop relationship patterns that attempt to resolve interpersonally what you can resolve only within yourself. In other words, if you have some personal problem and then you're thinking, you marry this person, they'll solve it for you. And the problem is something you have to work out within. And you have to recognize that they may be helpful in some way, but the problem is within. It's an interesting conversation I've been having with a devotee, and he has challenges in chanting japa, unique challenges, at least from what I've seen. And he said sometimes he could spend 2 hours chanting just 4 or 8 rounds, and he really gets into them. But if he tries to chant 16 rounds in 2 hours, that's a problem. Then he gets discouraged. He doesn't pronounce properly. He rushes. And so I was writing him and saying the problem is not the 16 rounds or the 8 rounds, but it's your approach. So there's something internally that's frustrating you and you need to work on it. But he's kind of looking at it like the 16 rounds is a problem. But it's an internal situation. So if you have personal problems, and don't think that you get married, they'll go away. They may get covered for a while during the honeymoon stage, but they don't go away until you work on them. So don't think just by getting married your partner's going to solve all your problems. It doesn't work that way. It's a very good point. I'll read that again. If you have unhealthy emotional needs, you may develop relationship patterns that attempt to resolve interpersonally. Interpersonally means between people. What you can only resolve within yourself. Unhealthy emotional needs may cause you to unload unrealistic expectations on your marriage partner, thus placing an unfair burden on him or her. A marriage partner is not an antidote for your personal unhappiness. A marriage partner is not an antidote for your personal unhappiness. In other words, what she's saying is, if you think your marriage partner is an antidote for your personal unhappiness, then what happens is you have unfair expectations laid on the person. And a lot of times they don't even know you have these expectations. They're just expectations you have internally. And they don't even know they're supposed to fulfill them, what to speak of whether they could fulfill them or not. So, so Shane says, these I've seen happen to many women. She feels incomplete, then she gets married and she feels complete, and then, or she wants to be complete by getting married. It's true, it's true. Marriage can make you feel complete, but when you have deep personal issues, then it's not going to solve those. Being lonely is another thing. Lonely is normal, but having a personal problem, like an emotional or psychological problem, and thinking that being married will solve it, if it's a deep problem, that means you have to work on yourself. There's certain things that marriage will solve. It's just you're coming together with another person, so the loneliness, the relationship, and so forth, that's normal. But she's not saying that. She's saying if you're an unhappy person by nature and you have some issues that you have to work out, then don't think that you'll be happy. just by being with that person, or that person can make you happy. Yeah, you could be with someone and feel lonely. They can neglect you. Yeah, there's a lot of... Okay, let's read the next one. Marriage is not a cure for less than ideal sadhana. Oh, this is a good one. Okay, listen to this one, ladies and gentlemen. Over the years, some women have expressed to me that their desire for a really dedicated spiritual partner, have expressed to me their desire for a really dedicated spiritual partner to help them improve their sadhana, their spiritual practices. Association is certainly a key element for good sadhana. But ultimately, the responsibility for spiritual life rests upon the individual. So, in other words, getting some background noise here. So, in other words, it's the same principle. He's thinking, let's say maybe I have bad sadhana, so I'll just get married and automatically I'll have good sadhana. Because I'll be married to a man who has good sadhana. Well, there's a lot of men who have good sadhana and their wives don't, and their association didn't help. It may or may not, but she's saying don't count on it, because it may not help. It's just a reality. Does that make sense? In other words, it's like you can be in an ideal situation, you can have great association, but it doesn't mean that you're going to take advantage of it. So it's like she's saying, don't enter marriage thinking it's a solution for things it's not a solution for. It's always you have to put into it. You have to make it work. You have to do your part. You have to take responsibility. Ultimately, you have to take responsibility for your own sadhana. Now, if you take responsibility for your own sadhana and your husband or wife has good sadhana, then all the better. That will help you even more. But if you don't, it's not just because they have good sadhana that you will. That's a universal principle that operates in any situation. You can go to Vrindavan, an ideal situation. It doesn't mean you'll take advantage of it. It just means the opportunity is there. But you have to take advantage of it. Yes? Yes. Okay. Know your family issues and actively work on them. Okay, it's another introspective question here. Even when you are working on personal issues and consciously think you want a healthy relationship, there are important patterns to examine that can cause material discord. People from unhealthy families are often unconsciously driven to seek relationships with the same unhealthy, dysfunctional patterns they grew up around. Okay, listen to this. This is very interesting. Scary also. Interesting and scary. Sorry for the background music here. Not so great for the recordings, but I guess you get effects of being in India. So, what's being said is, an example is given here. In Western psychology, this is viewed as an attempt to fix the relationship they had in childhood. For example, a woman may repeatedly marry abusive men like her overbearing father, or a man may repeatedly seek out women who are emotionally distant and unavailable, like his unfeeling mother, as a subconscious attempt to recreate the situation, fix it, and attain closure. Better to find closure first and then move on to a healthy situation. So, yeah, I'm trying to talk loud. Okay, most of them just left. Indians speak very loud. And I don't know why. I think because of all the horns on the buses are so loud, and they play speakers so loud that they can't hear anymore. So I have to speak really loud so they can hear one another. It's just my theory. So what she's saying is that sometimes you're raised in a family in which you, let's say, had an abusive father, and then you attract a man who's abusive because you want to fix him, and that would kind of resolve the issue you had with your father that you can never resolve. Or you had a distant mother, so you marry a partner who's distant, and then by trying to create a good relationship, you solve the problem that you have with your mother, but it doesn't work that way. So what she's saying is that if you have issues like that from your family, become aware of them and resolve them before you get married, but don't take them out on your partner and try to make your partner like a, what's the word? A surrogate. You know, like you're solving your problem with your father by marrying this other guy. No. Okay, let's read on. I know women that have boyfriends and marry men who are all weak. They have addiction problems like that, and they're always attracting men like that, trying to fix them for some reason. How to resolve if abuse is already going on? Depends what country you live in. Oh, you mean abuse of your father? Oh, what's going on? Get away from it so it can't happen. Indian culture and Western culture are different, so I think what's considered abusive in Western culture may not be considered always abusive in Indian culture. And they deal with it differently. Just like in Indian culture, classrooms, students are abused verbally and sometimes physically, and that's just the accepted norm. If you do that in America, the teacher could be arrested. So, you know, how abusive may be defined according to culture, and so people deal with it differently according to culture. But you never want to be in a situation where you become emotionally damaged by what's going on, because that's not good for you, it's not good for anybody. So, no. In terms of marriage, in terms of abusive husband, Prabhupada has not dealt with it directly, but he said that if a woman marries a devotee husband and the devotee husband is not following Krishna consciousness principles, then she has no obligation to stay with him. That's her choice. She doesn't have to. I don't think it ever came up to Srila Prabhupada about a husband physically abusing a wife. And it only came up to him about children being physically abused. And Prabhupada was extremely upset about that. But to my knowledge, it never came up where women were being physically abused. It's not something that people would want to bring to Prabhupada. Yeah. In like more traditional cultures, like Achincha saying, then it's kind of like the husband can do anything. The wife's just supposed to accept it, but that's actually a perversion. Because the husband is the leader and the wife should follow, so then he misuses his power, and he may mistreat her, and he expects her to just accept it. So that's a misuse of a good system, where the wife respects the husband, but she respects him because he's respectable. We had talked about that. Yeah. In London, you can sue him, you can have him arrested. It's up to the individual how they want to deal with it. It's unfortunate, for sure. But, yeah, different cultures deal with it differently. Can we kill that kind of father? No. can only kill somebody if they're trying to kill you, at least from the point of view of Manasamhita. If they're attacking or trying to kill you, it's a self-defense. Every situation, every individual is different, so they have to decide how they want to deal with it. I don't think anyone would want to kill their father normally, unless they're... they'd want to kill the demoniac spirit, but sometimes they just have to be tolerant. In Western culture, when there's abuse, then there, at least in America, then there's organizations that can help families, give counseling and so forth. I don't think those have developed in other countries. But the reality is, as Kali Yuga continues, there's going to be more and more abuse. So there's more, in America, there's a lot of education that goes on to help families work well together. In fact, I have one disciple, Goldine, and that's what she does as a profession. She goes in and she has to deal with families who are in difficult situations, teach them how to communicate, how to get along, because they don't have the skills. Yeah, let's leave Anusha alone. It's a difficult situation, which she's dealing with herself. But because it's Kali Yuga, then in some countries they've developed these family services to help people that don't have skills to deal with them. But I think Anusha has many skills to deal with it, although I doubt in Malaysia they have family services, and then I doubt that everyone would want to partake of them, but we just have to be tolerant as far as possible. Anyway, let's continue reading. Anyway, the point that's being made is if you have difficulties in your home life, just understand that it could affect you, and you don't want issues. You don't want to come into a marriage with unresolved issues, family issues. So you want to get over that, forgive them, and not take out work through the issues so you don't have to take them out on your husband or your wife. That's the idea. So, okay. She gives an example. For example, Janice grew up in an alcoholic family. Her mother was alcoholic and her father often stayed away from home on business trips. Janice took on a lot of her mother's responsibilities, caring for younger children and worrying about bills. When she was older and in relationships, she began... When she was older and in relationships, she always seemed to end up with guys who were irresponsible, had addictive problems, or weren't good at handling their money. Now that she has become a devotee, she wants to get married, but is afraid that she will attract a similar person into her life. She decides to get counseling to understand why this is happening. She works on her past. She comes to understand how her identity is tied up in rescuing others. She doesn't have a sense of who she is without this. She realizes she could easily misapply the philosophy of compassion. Once she recognizes her patterns, she identifies healthy behaviors and puts them into practice. So she just understands that she's developed a certain nature from being, or a certain kind of what you could say, a dysfunctional mentality or behavior that could exist in a marriage if she doesn't deal with it. And so she resolves it before she gets married. She understood it. Through some counseling or therapy, she understood it, and she worked through it, and then she got married. So marriage is a complex and difficult journey, and what she's saying here is you don't want to bring in, you want to start the journey from a healthy point. So you don't want to bring in all this baggage and think I'll just, of course you may not even know you have it, that's another point. So she's saying reflect on your upbringing and situation and see. Is there, are there things I need to work on so that I can be more normal, so to speak, for lack of a better word. Okay. So, same topic, but she has another title for it. Heal old wounds before marriage. Now, I can say from personal experience that I was raised in a normal family. My mother never worked. My father, went to work every day, came home every night, and he was a good father, and I had a good mother. But there's always something that we get from our parents that may not be what our spouses appreciate. So then I noticed sometimes that when my mother got upset, she would talk to us for like a half an hour and tell us about how upset she was and just go on and on and on. So I noticed that sometimes I would do that with my wife, and I said, oh no, this is not right. I'm doing what my mother did. Just because my mother did it, I kind of inherited that trait. So we want to be aware of these things. Did we inherit something that wouldn't really be healthy for a relationship? That's also why it's important to have good marriage, because you model to your kids what is a husband, what is a wife. And if the wife is always nagging and that's what the daughter sees, she's probably going to be similar. She may do similar things to her husband, because after all, that's what her mother did, and that's normal for her. So be careful. Have pity, heal, feel, and deal. Have pity on your spouse. Self-realization includes understanding your conditioned identity. Don't think your negative conditioning is just the way I am, quote unquote, but endeavor to improve yourself through introspection, professional help if necessary, and intense spiritual practice and prayer. The more you understand yourself and your prospective spouse, the better. So this is what I was saying earlier. It's so important to be self-aware in any kind of relationship. It's very important in Krishna consciousness, obviously, to be self-aware, because there's so many things we need to improve in ourselves. But self-aware in terms of relationships means how your actions, how your mentality, how your attitude, how your words, behavior affects another person, and do you have certain patterns, like we were talking, I think in one class, we mentioned how this one man, when he was young and didn't get his way, he would run into his room and sulk. And that he noticed that he was actually doing that when he and his wife got in an argument. In the middle of the argument, if he didn't get his way, he would run into his room. And he realized he had this pattern from when he was a kid, and it was still taking place. Interesting, isn't it? So, you want to look at yourself and say, look in the mirror and say, am I weird? Do I do weird things? What's weird about me? What are the things that I could do that would drive somebody crazy? Do I act like a little kid sometimes? Do I just blow my temper if someone rubs me the wrong way? Do I yell and scream and have tantrum fits? Do I run in my room and slam the door? Do I go silent for hours or days? If you do, you could torture someone you marry, and you're supposed to love the person, not torture them, right? Shane, you eat pizzas every day. You might get fat, and your husband may not love you anymore because you're too fat. So be careful. Shane says he changed every week to be better. That's great. Yeah. No, if I'm upset when I talk to my wife, I did. I just talked too long. I talked. That's my problem. I talk too much. So I realized I would just, if there's something upsetting, I just make the point. It takes 2 or 3 minutes, but I'd go on for like 15 or 20. because that's what my mother did. So it would kind of drive my wife crazy. I don't do it anymore, but when I was younger, I realized I was doing that. So it's not fair to her. It was like a soliloquy, you know. It would have been good for a soap opera, but not good for a marriage. Okay. It's true, if your partner can't take your temper, it's his test. But why not make the test easier? Yes? You're supposed to tolerate each other, then what is relationships for? Because it's your duty to, you're supposed to tolerate one another, but you're not, it's your duty to act in a way that he won't have to tolerate you. Yes? Yes. Or otherwise you go wake up one morning and you go, okay honey, I'm going to be acting anyway I feel today, so just get ready to tolerate me, and if you can't, you're a bad husband. No. The point I made, Shane, in many other classes, we should always feel, okay, I should be tolerant, but we shouldn't force it on our spouse. No, you should be tolerant. No, we should be tolerant. That's how we should think. Okay. Not that we have to be a perfect saints to be married partners, but at least we should be sincerely endeavoring to be the best devotees we can. You know, it's like, especially in Krishna consciousness, you know, normally you marry someone, if you're Krishna conscious, you marry someone who is Krishna conscious, or you hope is Krishna conscious, or you feel is Krishna conscious, right? So, you know, if somebody's marrying you because they think you're a nice devotee and you'll support them in Krishna consciousness, then you have a duty to be somewhat of a good example, yes? If you just, you know, don't take Krishna consciousness as seriously as your spouse would like you to do, it's not service to them. Yeah. Make sense? Again, I am stressing the need to release and heal old wounds as much as possible before marriage. Then you may work to help one another in marriage and not be just relieving old karmic patterns. Conversely, be hesitant to get involved with someone if they haven't sorted out, or at least are working on their working on their own personal issues. In other words, you meet someone and you start to see this person has a lot of issues. And so you want to know, are you aware of these issues? Are you working on them? So if they're not aware and they're not willing to work on them, and the issues could be such that they're really difficult for marriage, for relationships, then you may be in for a rough ride. My chances of a nagging wife, not really, just a house in Mayapur. But you guys will take care of that, so nothing to nag about. Maybe nagging that I'm too renounced. Have to come down to earth, you know, to be a husband. Can't be too renounced when you're married, right? I said that. Can't be a brahmachari when you're married. Chinti, no. 32 questionnaire? No, but if you could send it to me, I'd like to see it. Yeah, and on the Grihastha Vision Team website, they have a questionnaire also. And there are probably many websites. Okay, let's just finish. Just few more sentences, and then we'll end. Sure, you should be the best person you can be. Then, on that platform, you can look for a suitable, like-minded partner. The more emotionally stable you are, the better your chances of finding a like-minded person, and the stronger your foundation for a lasting relationship. I mean, I'm going to say something that sounds funny, but I think it's true. If you are not emotionally stable, if you're like overly dependent person, or you have deep issues that you haven't resolved, and someone's attracted to you, then there's something wrong with that person. I've just said it. I know it sounds weird, but there's that person also is. In other words, if we're attracted to a person who's not capable of being a good partner, that's just extremely out of balance, or has deep issues in their life where they suffer a lot of mood changes and ups and downs and depression, there's something wrong with us if we don't see that that person is not suitable. We may have our own issues to such a degree that we think we don't even notice theirs. But the point is, you should notice. Not that we hold it against anybody, but just be aware that if you really like that person and you think you're compatible, but they have these issues, they should be aware of them and willing to work on them. And you should be aware of them and willing to work on them. And if you have your own issues, work on them. That's one of the blessings of being married, that you have to work on your issues. So it's a good platform. If you're not in a relationship, you're not really forced to work on issues. So, it's 8 o'clock at night, and my stomach is empty, and I was going to take prasadam. So, unless you have some pressing questions, I'm going to go, or pressing comments. Yeah. So Chinta will send these 32 questions. If anyone wants the 32 questions, then they can write a Chinta, or they can let her know, give her your email address, she'll send them to you, or I can send them, or maybe we can put them on my website, right? And you guys want to look at the hotel? Have some fun? Okay. Hold on, we'll give you a little tour of the lobby. Okay? This is like an Ayurvedic hotel and spa. And we'll give you a little tour of my wife and daughter. They're right there. Say hello. Janava, you're on. Say hello. There they are. The happy family. Where am I? I am coming around. There I am. I'm right here. Jai. Hare Krishna. You're welcome. So the moral of the story tonight is, don't marry someone who's crazy. And don't get married if you're crazy. That sums everything up, doesn't it? Sorry to be so blunt, but that's basically what the class was about. Where's this place? This place is in a suburb of Kolkata. It's called the Vedic Village. And I'm not exactly sure what it is, but one devotee, he does the marketing for this place. And there's one of the best Ayurvedic doctors that works here in India. And my daughter has had back pain for like 2 months. And her spine is a little out of shape. And so many devotees have come here and gotten very good results from the therapies here. So here we are. And then on Wednesday I leave for Mexico, straight from here. Daughter is Soltal, yeah. She's turning 13 in April, and she comes up to here on me. She grew like a foot in the last year, so. Prasadam, yeah. She's eating prasadam that makes her grow. Okay. Okay, we'll see everyone. I'm going to take prasadam. Hare Krishna, all glories to Prabhupada.